by the Most High God, there is a way in which God wants things to be done. There is a order to everything, right? I'll give you an example. When your child comes to your house to see you, no matter how old they get, they know how to act, what to say, what not to say when they're in your house, right? And if they don't act that way or say the right things, what's going to happen? Yeah, it's not going to end too well for them, is it? Well, God's the same way. He has protocols. So, this whole Torah portion is not only about Shemitah, but the entire book that we're studying, Leviticus, is about us drawing close to God, a holy God. Okay, so think about that for a minute. If it's all about drawing close to a holy God, He's holy, then there's going to have to be some things we have to do to make sure we can draw close to Him, because that's what He wants. So this is why we are studying Leviticus this month, and why we have put so much emphasis on it. So let's talk about Leviticus 25:2. It says, "When you come into the land which I give you." This was the command given for the Shemitah. This week our parsha deals primarily with the Shemitah, which is the 7th year in the cycle, and the year of Jubilee, or the Yovel, which is the 50th year. These are cycles of 7 and 50 years that Yahweh's established so that the land of Israel might rest. The instructions for these years were to take effect when they entered the promised land. So, if it's only for the promised land, why am I teaching you about it? Why? Why does it matter? We're not in the promised land. We're in America. So why does it matter? Well, let's find out. The Shemitah, the 7th year, and the Jubilee, the 50th year, are both based on the numeral 7. Okay? Shemitah cycles parallel the 7th day of creation week. It says God created the heavens and the earth and everything that was in it in 6 days, and on the 7th day He rested, right? So in the Shemitah, we see the same principles. 6 years your land is to work, the 7th year is to rest. So the land's actually working by sustaining you, right? Much like you work to sustain your family, 6 days a week. So the Shemitah cycles actually parallel the creation week. The 7th year is the year of rest. It also corresponds to the idea that the earth will exist the way we actually know it today for 6,000 years. It's followed by a 1,000 year of rest known as the 7th millennium. So we're seeing a small picture and a bigger picture. Much like in the Sabbath, we see the same thing. We have a weekly reminder of this. We have a 7-year reminder of this, and we're going to talk some more about the actual Jubilee. See, the Jubilee follows the 7-year set of sevens also. The year of the Jubilee is actually an 8th year in the counting. Now, what is so important about 8? 8 represents the new beginnings, right? So following the last set of the 7 years, the year of the Jubilee can also be identified with Shavuot. You guys are familiar with Pentecost. What do we do on the morrow after the Sabbath of Passover? We begin counting what? The Omer. It says 50 days later. 7 Sabbaths will be complete, and then the next day is Shavuot, right? That's 7 weeks of 7, which is 49, plus the last day of 50. That's Shavuot. So even in the feast, we're pointed towards the Jubilee. Okay? Shavuot is the year of Jubilee, both have to do with freedom. There's no coincidence there, right? Shavuot's about freedom, so is the Jubilee. As the 8th day of the year of Jubilee is also identified with the 8th day of Sukkot in the fall, it finds its connection in the concept for eternity. Once again, Sukkot is the only feast that has 8 days, right? And what is so important about the 8th day? It's the new beginning, okay? So you see these patterns even in the feasts. So in Leviticus 25:1-2 says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe on the Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall observe a Sabbath to Yahweh." So the exact day that the children of Israel entered the promised land is no longer known. No one knows when the actual date was. Thus, the starting dates for the sabbatical year and the year of Jubilee are no longer known. We know, however, we should try to understand the prophetic semblance here, the significance of this. Even though we don't know exactly when it is, even though we can guess, and we'll get into that in a little bit. There's no way to truly know when the actual Jubilee is any longer. So no one knows, when to start counting that 7 and when the 50 happens. And so there are some clues, though, that we're going to get into in the New Testament. 1 Peter 1:19 says, "The Sabbath rest is a picture of the eternal and prophetic day when we enter into his eternal rest. The Sabbath holds the key of life for the bride in her future life with her bridegroom. The Sabbath, a symbol of the wedding ring, marks a faithful bride and enters her into a heavenly order that brings about life beyond any earthly trappings. In so doing, our souls are being transformed as our spirit has been transformed." Once again, 1 Peter 1. So, the Sabbath rest is a picture, according to the Word, of the prophetic day that's coming of the eternal rest. There's a book out by David Millstone. It's called The Three Pillars. Anybody ever read it? No? In his book, he points out that just like Yahweh chose the children of Israel as his chosen people, Yahweh also chose the land of Israel itself as his land. He could have chose anything. He chose it over all the lands of the earth. Now, true, he does own it all. According to Psalms 24, he owns the entire earth and everything on it, and the cows on 1,000 hills, right? So the earth does belong to Yahweh and all that fills it, the world and those who dwell in it. However, he chose this little piece of land as the land that he wanted, right? Now, who's been to Israel? Anybody been to Israel? Okay. Would you choose Israel as the promised land if you were God? Okay. I'm saying, depends on what you like. Israel has everything there is to offer, true. And there are some beautiful places on this earth. There's a reason why Yahweh put his name there. And if you don't believe me, look at a Google Maps, go on the aerial search, and look down in the mountain range, and you will actually see a sheen formed in the mountain. That sheen looks like a W, is a symbol for God himself. So there's a reason why he chose that land. According to Deuteronomy 11:10 and 12, it says, "For the land which you are going in to possess is not like the land of Egypt, from which you have come, where you sowed your seed and watered it by foot as a vegetable garden. But the land which you are passing over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water from the rain of heaven, a land which Yahweh your Elohim looks after. The eyes of Yahweh your Elohim are always on it, from the beginning of the year to the latter end of the year." Did you catch that? When I say latter, what comes to mind? End of days? Latter rain? So it says here, from the beginning, from the former rains, to the latter end of the year, the latter rains, he will have his eye always on his land. Always. So right here in Deuteronomy, we also see a prophetic picture of the former and latter rains. And according to the word, it will be, the former and latter rains will be poured out at one time in the end. We're getting to that. Are y'all tracking with me so far? A quiet crowd this morning. The rest of Leviticus will explain the condition that Yahweh has set in order for his people to be given the treasure of the land. This is a deed of trust. How many of you guys are familiar with land covenants and deeds and things of that nature? I deal with them every day. There are things you have to have in order to have rights to be on a piece of property, okay? These next few slides we're actually going to lay out, according from the Word, exactly what Yahweh, what His land covenants and deeds are all about, okay? It says, the land is given, however, with a deed of trust, which is the Torah. If men breach the deed of trust, which is to disobey Torah, then the rightful owner of the land will send them away into exile until his appointed time of restoration. So, who owns the land? Yahweh, right? Who has a lease on the land? Children of Israel. What is the rules in order to live there? Okay, so if you have rental property, you have a house, and you're renting it out, you sign a lease, you put it together, so you're going to pay me so much every month, you're going to keep the yard looking good, you're not going to have parties, you're not going to destroy my house in any way, and if you don't pay on time, or you tear up my house, I'm going to kick you out. And you sign your name on it, and that's it. Now you have a lease, right? So if you as a landlord show up and you go over to the house and look at it, and they're having a wild party, tore all the walls down, and the yard is on fire, you're probably going to get rid of them, right? Yeah, your yard's on fire. You're going to get rid of them. And you have every legal right, because it says so on the lease not to do that. Well, according to the laws of the Shemitah and the Torah, there's some things we're not supposed to be doing in God's land. So first we begin with the instructions for the 6 years of labor where independent farmers will work the land. They will be required during those years to give of their tithes to the priests or the Levites, plus special gift offerings for the poor. When in the 7th year, their land becomes everyone's land, in order that there may be an equal share of the fruit of the land. During the 7th year, no one declares ownership. Even the animals have an equal share in the fruits of the land. The Shemitah cycle is an essential rhythm in time designed to help all constantly keep in mind that Yahweh is the true owner of the land and of His people. Every 7 years. So you have a field. It's been in your family for thousands of years. You plant it, you work it, you build it up, everything's great. You're going for the 6th year, and then the 7th year, those 6 years that you're working it, no one's going to come into your field and steal anything out of it. Because if they do, you have the right to prosecute them. It's everything that comes out of it is yours. But on the 7th year, the land rests. And on that 7th year, anything that grows in that field is free game for anyone. You can't say, get out of my field. That's mine. No, it's God's. You can't say, well, I'm going to go out and just do a little harvesting. No. Even the fruit of the vines belong to God. It's designed for one simple purpose. Every 7 years, the entire nation of Israel comes together and they become one. It's all about unity. See, it doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. Once every 7 years, you're all equal. Nobody owns anything. Nobody has anything. It's all shared commonly. Now, you might ask yourself, what in the world am I going to do during that year? If the land has the rest, and your only means of anything is to work the fields, and now you have no work to do, what are you going to do for a year? I mean, really? You're going to sit around and take a whittling? I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah, go fishing? Sure. That'd be great. Well, since the land is to rest, it also, not only does it make everyone equal, but it gives everyone ample opportunity to come together, be one as a body in Messiah, be one as a country, as a people. It also gives you the whole year in order to study the Word and get right with God. You have nothing else to do. Now, how nice is that? How many times have you gotten so busy that you haven't prayed that week? And then the week turns into 2 weeks, and then into 3, and then into 4. Or you get so busy that Shabbat jumps on you, you don't even realize it's coming. It's there. How many times does that happen? It happens to me. Come on, y'all. We got one person in the back being honest. 2, okay. It happens. That's the beauty of the Shemitah. One time a year for a whole entire year. All of those excuses are gone. So, reminder of ownership. So why is it necessary for us to constantly be reminded that Yahweh is the true owner of everything? Why is that so important? We've already seen a couple reminders to this point of ownership in the actual Torah portions. The first reminder was given to Pharaoh during the plagues, right? That was meant to teach him that the earth was Yahweh's. We read it in Exodus 9. It says, Moshe said unto him, As soon as I go out of the city, let me spread out my hands to Yahweh, let the thunder cease and the hail to be no more, so that you will know the earth belongs to Yahweh. We see it a second time when the Israelites had first reached Mount Sinai. Exodus 19:4 says, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, if you diligently obey my voice, and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words which are to speak to the children of Israel. So, once again, he says, the earth is mine. Well, the Israelites were reminded that they must obey and love Yahweh because he owns them and knows what is best for them. You can read this in Deuteronomy 10:12. It says, And now, Israel, what is Yahweh your Elohim asking of you but to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all of his ways and to love him, and to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all of your heart, with all of your being, to guard the commandments of Yahweh and his laws, which I command you today for your good. See, the heavens and the heavens belong to Yahweh, your Elohim, also the earth, with all that is in it. So, not only does God own the earth and the heavens, but if you call yourself Israel, he owns you also. Right? Y'all are like, where's he going with this? So the question is, why all the reminders and the commandment to give the land a Sabbath? It's pretty simple. Man inherently possesses a strong sentiment of ownership. The idea of it's mine is fraught with danger. A verse in Deuteronomy conveys this thought, and you can read it in Deuteronomy 8:17. It says, You then shall say in your heart, My power and my strength and my hand have made for me this wealth. But you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, in order to establish his covenant which he swore to your fathers as it is today. See, this is the reason for the land to have its Sabbath. This is the reason for the land to return back to its owners and have to rest. This is the reason, because I believe it goes all the way back to Adam. You remember when Adam was actually formed, when God made him? What did he use to make him? Dirt from the earth, right? Okay. So he made him from the dirt of the earth, and he gave him dominion over the entire earth and everything that was in it, right? That would mean everything was whose? And so, after Adam and Eve both fell from glory and sin entered the world, everything was cursed for their sake. Do you think the idea of everything on the earth and everything that's in it I have dominion over left his mind at that point? See, I have a theory that since Adam was created in God's image, and God is the most powerful being in the entire universe, created everything, has say-so, makes all the rules, And we have a little bit of those same things in us. Wouldn't that be a fair assumption? That's probably why that mankind has such a problem with rebellious thinking. Like, no one's going to tell me what to do. Well, I mean, nobody tells God what to do. Who can, right? I did this on my own. Well, who created everything? God did. You see where it's coming from. The difference is that sin has entered in and twisted it. And since Adam was formed of the dirt, then it makes sense why the dirt has to rest, doesn't it? So let's enter into his rest. As we learn in Torah studies from the past few Torah portions in Tatzari and Metzorah, that if we do not learn to rest in his principles and allow Yahweh to have his life through us, that we would turn away from him and self-determine our walk and become proud of what we have accomplished at our own strength. This self-government opens the door to the enemy to build his kingdom through us. His kingdom, which includes immorality, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, jealousy, covetousness, and fractions loaded with bitterness, anxiety, stress, and fear. That's what it leads to. These acts of a sinful nature in turn open the door to diseases and illnesses. You can read that in Deuteronomy 28. So in the book of Hebrews, we are instructed not to put our trust in carnality of the flesh. We are to conform our nature to Yahweh's nature and enter into his rest. This is to be our daily exercise of our heart before Yahweh. Enter into his rest. See, everything has to rest. But we don't want to do that. We're going to do it our way. Because if I let the land rest, then I'm going to lose that crop, and I won't be able to buy that new Corvette that I've been wanting so bad. So I'm going to trust in my own strength instead of God. Right? Now, I admit to you, it is pretty strange. When you read this, if you don't know anything about horticulture, you read this thing, you think, good grief. I mean, that's going to take 3 years before you see anything in that land if you stop planting it. If you don't plant it for 1 year and it rests for that year, you can't do anything to it. You can't even go out there and plow it. You can't touch it. Which means not only are you going to miss the planting season and the harvest, but you're going to miss the prep season as well until the next year to start over. So then you got to start all over and prep that, then plant it and go through this. You understand what that means? You can't plant things in the wrong time of the year either. So by the time that grows and you get a good harvest, you're going to be in what year? You're going to be in the 8th year. Towards the end of it, you're really not going to see anything real good until the 9th. See what I'm getting at? That takes a lot of courage. It also takes a lot of trust to trust that God will provide for you, right? Well, you see the same thing in your daily walk. If you think that just because you're not a farmer that these things don't apply to you and there's nothing to learn, you see the same thing every week. 6 days a week you work, 7 days of Sabbath. Oh man, if I take off Shabbat, man, my boss will probably fire me. Or if I take off Shabbat, we got a lot of bills to pay this month. I don't know how I'm going to, it takes a lot of faith, a lot of courage. And anybody who's in that situation where they have to make that choice every week, I feel you. I know where you're coming from. I understand how hard it is. We have to take it on faith. If he can sustain an entire nation based upon one harvest that lasts for 3 years, why can we not trust him to us to take 1 day off a week not to do anything? I mean, have you tried to work around the clock? There's 24 hours in a day, right? Have you ever tried to work 24 hours straight and never take time to rest? Who's done that? I've done it. Okay. Have you ever done it for 36 hours? You have. Have you ever done it for 48? Okay. What happens to your body over that time period? You don't think straight, you make mistakes, you forget things, you get really, really tired. A lot of different things happen. You have headaches, you can't see right, you have to have rest. So Yahweh's was pretty smart when he said you need to rest the whole day. I think that if he can provide for our ancestors for 2 years, and I think he can provide for us once a week, and we can handle it. Where am I at? There we go. So, you reap what you sow. Do not lead astray. Elohim is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he shall also reap. Because he who sows to his own flesh shall reap corruption from the flesh. But he who sows to Spirit shall reap everlasting life from the Spirit. And let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not grow weary. And there's the key. If you endure and you keep going, in due season you will reap if you don't grow weary. That's something I have a hard time with. I really do. It's easy to do what's right when you feel good. It's easy to do what's right when no one's looking. It's easy to do all those things, but when you get tired, when you get down, when things start going wrong, that's when it starts getting harder to do what's good and what's right. And pretty soon, you get to the end of that, it's easy to give up. And the interesting thing about it is if you can just hang in there just a little bit longer, what normally happens is that's when victory comes. But see, we give up right before we cross the finish line because we go tired. We get wore out. Or we lose hope. This is with anything in life. Now, I've had the real pleasure of being able to minister to a young man a couple of weeks ago, and this is one of the things we were talking about. And that's what I told him. I said, you got to hang in there until the end. The difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that the person that was successful just held on one more day. That's it. That's the difference. That's really the difference. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It just boils down to, I think myself personally, and I'll just relate this in a modern terminology. When you see somebody adorned out and they have all this extravagant clothing on and jewelry and nails and hair and all these things, you look at them, they have a gold bag and all this stuff. Man, that's real gaudy looking, right? That's gaudy. The reason why we say that is because that's just like, because that's what God does, right? Well, see, I believe God is gaudy. I believe he likes to show off, right? Am I wrong? He does like to show off. So when you go to watch a good movie and you go to see like a superhero movie, everything's going bad. It always gets down to the end. Everybody's in despair. Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And at the very last second, in the nick of time, here comes the hero and he saves the day. What would happen if those people would have just said, nobody's coming, and gave up, walked away? Well, then the hero wouldn't have been able to save the day. There'd have been nobody to save. See, God's kind of the same way. You don't think when the children of Israel were standing at the bank of the Red Sea and the entire army of Egypt was coming up behind them that wasn't gaudy? You don't think God doesn't like to show off? Everybody's freaking out. What are we going to do? They're coming to kill us. They're even blaming Moses for it. Like that was going to save them. So what happened? God showed off. Because it would have been real easy for them to just say, well, why don't we just surrender? Moses, as their leader, could have just said, you know what? We give up. Here, take my staff, and let's bow down and we'll go back to Egypt. Because I see no way out of this. Would have been easy. But he didn't. He said, God, what do you want me to do? And I said, put your staff in the water. I'll take care of this. Got him. Got him. So we reap what we sow. So the next time that it seems like it's an insurmountable task or that things just aren't working out, just hang on one more day. One more day. Because God's coming to show off. Leviticus 25 calls us to honor every Sabbath, every seventh year as a rest for the land. All work on the land has to cease for one entire year. The intention was for the people to put all of their trust in Yahweh and His principles to provide for their very existence. If they committed to His rest and obeyed Yahweh, they would be abundant provisions in the sixth year to help prepare and keep them in the seventh year of the Sabbath rest. Yahweh would cleanse the land from all defilement, physical and spiritual, and keep the enemy far from their doorstep. But does that actually make sense? Would you do it? I have to say that I wrote a note down here and said, nope. Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. But God doesn't have to make sense to you. He doesn't have to explain how He does it. All He asks is that you have faith that He will do it, because He said He will do it, right? Since no sowing and planting is allowed, the poor and the wealthy together ate of the abundance of the prior year's harvest, thus promoting unity and peace. No one was allowed to store produce and treat it as their own. Thus there would be no strife that originated from the attitude of, this is mine. In the seventh year, all were equal. From the king all the way down to the guy who scrubs the toilets. They were all equal. Because there was a suspension of work in the seventh year, the sages have said that this was to facilitate the study of Torah. Today we study Torah on Shabbat, but imagine a whole year of freedom to study. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how much more your life would be improved if you could do this? How much more could you learn and understand? Not so much learn, not for knowledge of being able to say, well, I know this and quote Scripture, but how much more will you be able to actually learn to improve yourself, to improve your relationship with your fellow man, improve your relationship with God? How much more could you actually put into practice if you could do this? Think about it. If you could take the year off and go to school for free, would you do it? If you was going to get another year in college, would you do it? It's free. You don't have to work. You can go back to school. I would do it. I would do it. This is what it's about. About one more year. Because, you see, it stands to reason. Since everybody's equal at this point, what's going to happen in the next year when we start over? You think all those social status is going to be the same? Or do you think now that it's all wide open for everyone? So if you just spent a year back in Bible college learning how to better your situation, imagine now what you can do with the next 6 years when it's time to go back to work. It's not only to better the land, but it's to better you. Shabbat's the same way. See, Shabbat is a microcosm of this bigger picture. Okay? Everybody tracking with me? See, Yahweh knows that an individual needs time to recover from influences of the world at frequent intervals. Man, is that not true? Is that not true? You know, Brian and I have had this talk before. You know, Friday night comes around, it's like, man, it's like, shake all that junk off and rest. It's a good thing. But we want to fight this. Oh, no, man, I can't this. What about that? The world's going to continue to turn without you for 24 hours. You're not that important, you know? There's all the influence of the world. You know, we deal with so much stuff during the week. On Sabbath, we don't have to deal with that anymore. We let it go. We release it. You hear that? Release it. So all of those people, all of those phone calls, all those problems, all that stuff goes bye-bye. No more. You know, I think we need to change the slide, too, where it says at the beginning, turn your phones to silent. We should just say, turn them off. Leave them at home. That way we can't be bothered. Because how many people call you when you're trying to worship, right? It's like inevitably somebody sends you a text or calls you, and you're like, come on, man. I can't have one day off? Worship God and rest from this? So, yeah, I think we should just throw them away. Yeah, there we go. We should have like a usher that collects them at the door. Turn in your cell phone. Send out group text. We are all worshiping. Sorry, we cannot be bothered. Please leave a message at the tone. Beep. So, what the Sabbath is meant to achieve for the individual, the Shemitah is meant to receive or achieve for the nation as a whole. See, not only is it, there's no rivalry, there's no competition, just sharing, equality, community. Community trust in the Creator, lovingly sustaining His people. So what the Sabbath does for you, the Shemitah does for the land, the nation as a whole. It restores families. It restores friendships. Makes the land more fertile so that you don't suck the life out of it. There's so many things that you can apply to your daily life just right here in this little Torah portion. It's only one chapter long. Let's talk about the Shemitah and wealth for a minute. It says, Yahweh wanted the Israelites to learn that their mission on earth was not to be slaves to the soil, just addicted to tilling it up. You ever been addicted to tilling, Neil? Gathering in the crops and enriching themselves as they did other nations. They had a much higher and more noble purpose. They were to reflect the nature of the Creator, who, because of their obedience, would provide them with the land and their subsistence. Yeah. You know, it's easy to become a slave to your job. I can testify to that. It is so easy. I was thinking about it. You know, this is Memorial Day weekend, right? 3-day weekend. I'm in retail. You know what that means? There ain't no day off for me. Everybody else is off. They come to shop. That's the reality of it. So I made a decision that for the second time in 15 years, I'm going to take Memorial Day off. For the second time. Why? Because I've become a slave to my job to the point to where, I'm addicted to it. Every minute of the day, I'm thinking about work. I got to get a break. There's a reason why I'm bald. Yeah, it's a reason why I'm bald. Has to do with worry, and that's against the commandments, and we're not going to talk about that. So let's just move on. Yeah, Matthew 6 says, "Do not worry then, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For all of these the Gentiles seek after, and your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first the reign of Elohim and His righteousness, and all these matters shall be added unto you." Yeah. Easy to say, harder to do. Real simple to read that and say, oh yeah, God will provide all those things. Yeah. A lot harder to do it. If it wasn't hard to do it, then how many in the entire world would keep Shabbat if it wasn't hard to do? But that's the thing about it, is it's only hard to do up here. In reality, it's not hard at all. In reality, it's pretty easy. There's really only 2 commands to the Sabbath. One's not to work, and the other one is to what? Yeah, rest, keep it holy. That's it. Boom. That's it. How hard is that? It's not hard at all. But that means that we have to stop doing all that other stuff that clouds our mind for 6 days. And you know how hard it is to get momentum going? You know? Monday morning you go to work and you're like, dragging, you're drinking coffee, and as the day goes, you start getting this building of momentum, right? To the point to where when 5 o'clock comes around, it's hard to stop because you got a momentum going. You still want to go. And then the next day, you just keep building on this momentum, building, and it comes to Friday, it's like, oh, I can stop. That's when the challenge comes, right there. Because it's like you have to stop that momentum, and then you got to start over the next, on Sunday, start building it back up again. Yep. So like I said, it's really not hard. It's just hard here. So instead of thinking of it as stopping, I don't think about it as just hitting pause. Just hit pause. Just pause for a cause. We're going to have t-shirts made. It says, pause for a cause. Shabbat's coming. That'd be good. So, the Shemitah year should lift man out of his greediness and his materialism. He would have to forego profit and ownership in order to gain the right spiritual values. Shemitah and resting would bring holiness and set apartness to those abiding in Yahweh, which in turn brought glory to His name. The Shemitah was when hearts were checked to see if any course correction is needed. The Shemitah is about separation from common and holiness and from acceptable behavior to actually walking in the footsteps of Mashiach, which coincidentally are two separate things. Acceptable behavior is not exactly walking in the footsteps of God. Shemitah is the release from past debts and a restoration of freedom to help the poor and to prevent greed from taking hold of people's hearts. So that was the importance of having the Shemitah every year, right? Or every 7 years, excuse me. Shemitah is also designed to maintain the strength of a relationship between Yahweh and His people. And it taught them that Yahweh is the source of all their blessings. The Shemitah promoted a compassion for the poor and a responsible stewardship of the land. Taking care of the poor and taking care of the land. So, since we keep talking about this 6 days in one day, 6 days in one day, let's talk about the pattern of 6 for a minute. Anybody see those patterns? 6, 6, 6, 6. No, not that many. So the pattern is 6 units. In all of this, you have 6 days, and then the Sabbath. You have 6 years, and then the Shemitah. Then you have 6,000 years, and then the what? The millennium. So the 6 units of struggle and toil is always followed by the 7th being a taste of the kingdom. So for it is in fact a picture of the 7th millennium when the Messiah rules. 6 days, 6 years are for sowing. So we have these microcosms. We got 6 days, and then you get a small taste of the kingdom on Shabbat. Then you have 6 years, and then you have a small taste of the kingdom again for a year. Then you got 6,000 years. God, I wish it'd be over soon. And then 1,000-year millennium, where you actually will have the kingdom. Yeshua also sowed. He also sowed in the parable of the sower. Matthew 13:37 says, and He answered them and said, He who is sowing the good seed is the son of Adam, and the field is the world, and the good seed. These are the sons of the rain, but the darnel are the sons of the wicked one. Therefore, for 6,000 years, Yeshua has been sowing sons of the kingdom into the field, which is the world, for 6,000 years. And guys, they're everywhere. Jeremiah relates this sowing to the renewed covenant. In Jeremiah 31, he says, See, the days are coming that I shall sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and the seed of beast. And it shall be that as I have watched over them to pluck up to break down and to throw down and to destroy and to afflict. So I shall watch over them to build and to plant, declares Yahweh. I shall make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Yehudah. We know that hasn't happened yet, has it? We would like to think that we are part of that renewal, that we are part of that Israel that is coming back together, or that Ephraim, if you want to call it that. But it's not totally fulfilled yet, because those 6,000 years of sowing men and people into the earth is not over yet. When that happens and it's over, then you will see all of the tribes coming back together as one. Maybe it'll be on the Shemitah. Maybe it'll be on the Jubilee. So Leviticus 25 also refers to the 6,000 years of pruning. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that bears no fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, so that it bears more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Stay in me, and I stay in you. As the branch is unable to bear the fruit itself unless it stays in the vine, so neither you unless you stay in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who stays in me and I in him, he bears much fruit, because without me you are able to do not. So you have to stay in the vine. Because that's what it really means. We're not replacing Israel. We're being grafted into Israel. Right? So the only way you can be grafted into something is if there's something to graft into. So stay in the vine. Stay in Mashiach. Let's talk about the Yovel for a second. Yovel is the year of Jubilee. So, when is the Jubilee? Every 50 years. You shall count 7 Sabbaths for years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7th Sabbath of years shall be to you 49 years. You shall then sound a ram's horn to pass through on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. Cause a ram's horn to pass through all of your land. And you shall set the 50th year apart, and proclaim release throughout all the land and all the inhabitants. It is a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you return to his clan. The 50th year is a jubilee to you. Do not sow, nor reap what grows of its own, nor gather from its unpruned vines. It is a jubilee. It is set apart to you. Eat from the fields its crop. In the year of the jubilee, let each one of you return to his possession. So what is the Jubilee about? It's about freedom. It's about return. Teshuvah. Yovel actually comes from a Hebrew root word, and it means a joyful sound, and its meaning a joyful sound associated with the sound of the shofar. According to the Strong's, number 8643, teruah means a shout or a blast of war, alarm, or joy. So when is that? Does that bring anything to mind when we talk about teruah? There you go, Feast of Trumpets. The special year was holy, sanctified, and set apart to accomplish Yahweh's special purpose. Yovel was to announce to Israel on Yom Kippur, the wedding day, in the 7th month on the 10th day when atonement was made, a trumpet was blown to proclaim liberty, freedom, and release for people suffering economic and social hardship. Everyone who had sold their family property had it restored to them. All land was given back to its original owners, and those who had been forced to sell themselves into slavery were released. No questions asked. So, there's some key terms that I mentioned in that particular thing. Some really key terms, and you should have your mind thinking right now about a few things. You should be thinking about Yeshua right now and how this all fits into him. And we're going to get to that, but first let's go to Luke 4. In Luke chapter 4 is the story of Yeshua. It says, "And the Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, and the recovery of sight to the blind, and to send away crushed ones with a released, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh." That's Luke 4, chapter 4, verse 18 and 19. This is the story. Y'all remember it? Yeshua walked into the temple, as was his custom, and they gave him the book of Isaiah to read, and this is exactly what he read. What is that referring to? It's referring to the Yovel. So, the Yovel year prevents the rich from becoming too rich and accumulating all the land of Israel, and the poor from becoming too poor. The Israelites could not buy up the land of Israel because the land itself belonged to Yahweh. He is the owner of the land of Israel. It is his to give by his grace and mercy, to lease it out to the children of Jacob as their inheritance. You have a 50-year lease. 49-year lease, 49-year lease is what you get. In the 50th year, it goes back to its original owner. Does everybody understand how that works? When Yahweh originally divided up the land and gave it to the 12 sons, he said, you have this, you have this, you have this. From that day forward, it is an inheritance to that tribe forever. For 49 years, they have the lease to it. Now, if you decide that you want to lease that to somebody else to farm it, you can lease it for 49 years to them. In the 50th year, it has to come back to you, because God gave it to you, not to them. It's your inheritance. Okay? Now, let's say you got into trouble, financial troubles, and you had to sell your farm. And let's say it was 20 years until the Yovel. You could sell it for 20 years to pay off your debts. But in the 21st year, which would be the Yovel, it has to come back to you. See, it's designed to where the land that belongs to God can never be squandered by us humans who do stupid things. Okay? It will always be in the family. It will always be God's land. It will always be tended by God's people. Always. No matter what we do, it's always going to come back to Him, and no one else could take it. 49-year lease. That's what you got. So, let's talk about the year of drought. Jeremiah 17 talks about a year of drought. It says, "For he shall be like a tree planted by the waters, which spread out its roots by the river, and does not see when the heat comes. And his leaves shall be green. In the year of the drought he is not anxious, nor does he cease from yielding fruit." The drought mentioned in the reference to the Shemitah and the Yovel, the word drought is used as no fields were sown or reaped during that time. So if you are planted in Yeshua, He is the stream of living water that nourishes us, right? And by obeying His word, we will have no fear of famine, but continue to bear much fruit in a time of drought. This is the promise. So, what our ancestors learned through the Shemitah and the Yovel, physically, we're to learn spiritually right here. Let's talk about another tree. said, "Blessed is the man who shall not walk in the counsel of the wrong, and shall not stand in the path of sinners, and shall not sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the Torah of Yahweh, and he meditates on his Torah day and night. For he shall be a tree planted by the river of waters, that yields its fruit in due season, and those leaves do not wither, and whatsoever he does prospers." Psalms 1:1. So, do you want to be that tree that's planted by a river of water? Yes? Let's talk about yet another tree. Let's go to, Revelations. Revelation 22 says, "And he showed me a river of water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. And in the middle of its streets and on either side of the river was a tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the trees were for the healing of the nations." So the Yovel year actually marks a season of the right to return, called an ingathering of the people of Israel and the 12 tribes. That's what it's all about, returning. As this time, many people will return through repentance as they witness Yahweh's deliverance and see the truth in Yahweh's word. This movement of repentance must in nature be followed by the restoration of Yeshua in the hearts of men. When we enter into Yeshua's death and resurrection, that of crucifying our sinful nature, we receive his resurrection power and are filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, entering intimacy with Yeshua by obedience to his ways. You can read these scripture verses in Acts chapter 18 and Luke chapter 3. So let's go back to Luke chapter 4 and let's read it in its entirety. The new meaning of the parable. Let's see here. It says, "And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And according to his practice, he went into the congregation on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. And having unrolled the scroll, he found the place where it is written, 'The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, and recover the sight to the blind, to send away crushed ones with a release, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh.' And having rolled up the scroll, he gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all the congregation were fixed upon him. And he began to say to them, 'Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing.'" What day do you think that was, guys? Exactly. I believe that from the timing of it, from the actual scripture that he read, and saying that it was fulfilled today in your ears, that we could come to the conclusion that this would have been a Jubilee year. Now, we're not going to get into the mathematics saying, okay, well, when was he crucified? Was it 30 AD? Was it 33? Was it 28? Did we go this way? Did we go that way? So when is the Jubilee? But I'm pretty sure you guys will be discussing that later in Roundtable. So I'm not going there today because I only got 5 minutes, ain't no way. So the context of this story was that Yeshua was reading the Haftorah from the prophets and the writing in the synagogue in Nazareth on the Sabbath. It is taught that in the first century that the Torah and the accompanying Haftorah readings were read through on a 3.5-year cycle. Since Yeshua was quoting verses in Isaiah that refer to Jubilee and claiming to fulfill them, he was probably speaking in a Jubilee year. In the first century, Yeshua became a fulfillment of this prophecy. The good news of the kingdom and the salvation that he was able to offer because of his death, resurrection, brought freedom to all of those that accepted him. Every man has sold himself to sin and needs a Redeemer to release him from his bondage. This was the liberty to the captives that Yeshua claimed to fulfill. And the acceptable year of Yahweh was a direct reference to the year of Jubilee. And coincidentally, the Jubilee is proclaimed on what day? On Yom Kippur. That is the day that it is proclaimed. So, Yeshua was meticulous about how much of the quote of Isaiah that he would read. What he stopped short of was the rest of Isaiah 61:2, which says, "And the day of vengeance of Elohim to comfort all who mourn." That's the rest of that verse. This part of the prophecy will be fulfilled when Yeshua, when he returns as the mighty and powerful warrior. There are two main aspects to the year of Jubilee: freedom from slavery and return of the land of the original holder. So why is it important that we know about the Jubilee? We already saw that Yeshua accomplished freedom for those who were in bondage to the slavery of sin, and I'm just about done. In his first coming. His second coming will bring vengeance to those who refuse to return to the land to its rightful owner. We can certainly see the birth pains of this future battle over the land occurring today. His second coming ushers in the seventh millennium, and this will be another Jubilee year. It will happen on a Jubilee. The only question is when is that? When is that? So when is the Jubilee? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Because I don't know. There's so much here to go through. Let's see here. I got 2 minutes. Do I have time to go through the law of the redemption? The kinsman redeemer? Can I get 5 minutes? Everybody good with that? No? Okay, good. All right. The boss said 7 minutes. Leviticus 25:24. The law of redemption was given to all 12 tribes of Jacob, and those associated with them from the blood of the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In Luke 15, Yeshua teaches the law of redemption from Leviticus 25 through the Yovel of the year of Jubilee. In the story are two sons. The younger son represents the house of Israel. The older son represents the house of Judah. The younger son asked his father for his inheritance early. Y'all know the story, right? Doing this was a declaration that his father was dead while he was still alive. With inheritance in hand, the younger son left his father's house and went to live in the world, leaving his father's teaching and instructions far behind. As he reached out for the pleasures in the world, he squandered his inheritance. He lost his identity and fell into a deep poverty, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. He became a hireling living among swine. Even the animals ate better than he did. So we can say this younger represents who? House of Israel. And the older represents the house of Judah. And the father is who? Yahweh himself. Right? So, once again, the younger son squandered his inheritance. Now, if we didn't have the laws of Jubilee, that would never come back to that family ever again. It's gone forever. His entire heritage will never return back. And it's not like we're talking about the family crown and the jewels and the cars and the money. We're talking about actual land that sustains them and keeps you alive. Without it, your family's going to die. Okay? And so we got supermarkets and refrigerators here, so we don't think about that very much. But when you go and give up your family's land back in those days, you're basically killing yourself and your descendants. The famine that came to the whole country that year was a sign that it was a sabbatical year. Mental and physical depravity overcame him, and he was humbled. When the younger son was humbled and had a contrite spirit, he could see again and remembered his father, and that the hirelings always had food to spare. His father's food was the Torah, the living word that would always nourish and satisfy hunger. Amos 8 says, "See, days are coming, declares the Master Yahweh, that I shall send a hunger in the land, not a hunger for bread, nor a thirst for water, but for the hearing of the word of Yahweh." Hunger for the food of his father, the word, caused the younger son to return with a repentant heart, to seek work as a hired hand. The father saw his son from afar off and was filled with compassion. He ran to him joyfully to receive him home. As the son was repenting, his father restored him back to full son status. Now, coincidentally here, the terminology of joyful there actually refers you to the season of joy, which is also called the Jubilee. It says, "But the father said to his servants," this is in Luke 15, "Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and a sandal on his feet. And bring the fattened calf here and slaughter it. And let us eat and rejoice, because a son of mine was dead and is alive again. And he was lost and is found." And they began to rejoice. The older son, who had obeyed his father's Torah all this time, showed great anger, refusing to give the right of return and redemption to his younger brother, as it is written in the law. The older son was acting more like a slave than a true faithful son. His mental attitude had brought him lower than his brothers. The older brother, the one who had been home all this time, actually died in his heart. And he lost the blessing. Torah without the Spirit will bring death, guys. But Torah with the Spirit brings life. The people who practice Torah in their hearts with the Spirit of Yeshua are the firstborn, and they will enter in and enjoy the banquet. They are the firstborn, according to Hebrews chapter 4. It was the Messiah from the tribe of Judah, the house of Judah, who purchased his brother back and offered him the right to return through redemption, according to the covenant promises of Abraham. In doing so, Yeshua also restored both brothers back to the land. Did you know that? Messiah is whose son? Messiah also physically whose son is he? Says he's from the tribe of Judah, right? Son of David. So, him representing the tribe of Judah, at his death, brought the other 10 tribes to be able to be restored back to the family from the inheritance that we squandered. How about that? Did you ever see it that way before? See, Yahweh's laws state that to seek the right of redemption, the Redeemer must be a blood relative. He must have the funds to purchase the forfeited inheritance, be willing to buy back the life of the brother and relative, and if the deceased kinsman had a wife, be willing to marry her. Who's the bride? This person is called the kinsman redeemer. We are witness to this command in the book of Ruth. And we read the book of Ruth last year. Ruth. It was Boaz who became the kinsman redeemer for Ruth. Later, their sons became the ancestors of King David in the line of the Messiah. We have been given the right to return through the blood of Messiah. He has fulfilled his promise to us. He was our kinsman redeemer. He was the only one that could do it. He was the only one that was willing to do it. So, there's quite a bit more. We're coming to an end here. I hope you guys got something out of this today. I know it was old hat, old history, and but once again, there's always something we can learn from these Torah portions always. And I thank you guys for allowing me the time to stand up here and try to teach you a couple of things today. I don't know if you learned anything, but thank you for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to stand before you guys. And now we will go to the delight of the Shabbat, oneg. Yeah. So thank you all again, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for watching a teaching from Emet HaTorah. If you are ever in the Odessa area, we would love to welcome you to our Shabbat service, 11 a.m. every Sabbath. For more information or for more teachings, feel free to find us on the web, www.emethatorohodessa.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook. Thank you. God bless you and your family. Shalom.